What if I told you that the woman caring for your children during the day was running a million-pound drug empire at night? 7:30 a.m., Moss Side, Manchester. Ume No kisses her 3 children goodbye, drops them at school, then heads to work at the local nursery where she spends her day nurturing other people's babies. She's the kind of childcare worker parents trust completely. Patient, caring, professional. The kind of person who makes communities feel safe. 4:30 p.m. The nursery closes. Ume No drives home to collect something from her wardrobe. Hidden among her children's clothes are 403 wraps of crack cocaine and 363 wraps of heroin. Street value? Over £115,000. She loads the drugs into one of the 10 rental cars she's hired this month and drives to Bolton to supply dealers who depend on her stock. Have you ever wondered how normal-looking people become untouchable drug kingpins? How a nursery worker, a footballer, an ex-soldier, and a family of brothers could control drug empires worth millions while living seemingly ordinary lives? Because what Ume No was doing in Manchester was happening across the north of England. In Bradford, a simple phone number had become the region's most trusted source for Class A drugs, taking 229,000 calls over 6 years and operating with the efficiency of a corporate call center. Meanwhile, in another part of Bradford, a gas canister that looked completely ordinary concealed 1 million pounds worth of high-purity cocaine, engineered with precision to fool even expert inspection. These weren't street corner dealers or chaotic drug addicts. These were sophisticated criminal enterprises run by intelligent people who believed they had built systems too clever for law enforcement to crack. They felt untouchable because they had learned to hide in plain sight, behind nursery jobs, football careers, family businesses, and technological innovation. But in the world of Class A drugs, nobody stays untouchable forever. How far would you go to protect someone you love, even if they're destroying everything you've built? What would drive a caring mother to risk her children's future for a man with a criminal record? Why would successful people choose criminal careers when they already had legitimate options? If you're ready to understand how ordinary people become extraordinary criminals, how love and loyalty can corrupt everything good in someone's life, and how the most sophisticated drug operations eventually collapse under their own success, subscribe to Dark Truth Files. Because the stories I'm about to tell you will change how you see every normal-looking person on every ordinary street, and what they might be hiding behind closed doors. Let me show you how the untouchable became the imprisoned. It started with a simple idea that would revolutionize drug dealing across Bradford. What if buying heroin and crack was as easy as ordering a pizza? The Sully line began as a basic ring and bring service in Manningham, Bradford. One phone number, one simple promise. Call, place your order, and drugs would be delivered directly to your location within minutes. But by 2017-2018, this simple concept had evolved into something unprecedented in British drug dealing history. 229,000 calls, 6 years of continuous operation, 24-hour service with shift rotations like a legitimate business. The Sully line had become Bradford's dominant drug distribution network, and its success was built on the kind of organizational intelligence that most legitimate businesses would envy. Mohammed Ayaz was the director, a man who understood that successful drug dealing required the same management principles as any other service industry: reliability, customer service, quality control, and operational efficiency. His brother, Mohammed Hassan, provided the family loyalty that strengthened their criminal partnership, while Tasawir Alam completed the leadership triangle that kept the operation running smoothly. But it was the supporting cast that made the Sully line truly sophisticated. Amir Rahman served as storeman and stockkeeper, maintaining inventory levels and ensuring product quality. Shiraz Mahmood managed the technology side, understanding that in modern drug dealing, phones were more important than street corners. The street level revealed the human cost of their success. Harim Hussein, just a teenager, had his future destroyed by adult criminal recruitment. Muhammad Khan became their driver, his vehicle transformed into a weapon in Bradford's drug war. David Coates, an ex-soldier who had served his country, found his military experience corrupted into service for a criminal empire. Most tragically, there was Malachi Hodgson, a footballer whose athletic promise was destroyed by criminal recruitment, though he would later receive a suspended sentence that suggested judicial recognition of his rehabilitation potential. The operation's efficiency was staggering. Customers could call at any hour and receive reliable service. The leadership rotated shifts to ensure constant availability. Quality was maintained, territory was protected, and profits flowed in amounts that made legitimate work seem pointless. For 6 years, the Sully line felt untouchable. They had created a system that served customer needs better than many legitimate businesses served their clients. They had built loyalty through reliability, market dominance through superior service, and criminal success through corporate-style organization. But success in the drug trade attracts attention from more than just customers. Community complaints about increased drug activity in Manningham began reaching police. Residents watched their neighborhood transform from a place where families lived into an open-air drug market where children grew up surrounded by normalized criminal activity. The police response required the kind of sophisticated surveillance that traditional street-level drug enforcement had never needed. SIM card seizures, stash house raids, communication intercepts. Law enforcement had to evolve to match criminal innovation. And slowly, the net began to close on an operation that had felt untouchable for so long that its leaders had forgotten the fundamental truth about criminal enterprises. They all eventually collapse under the weight of their own success. The 229,000 calls that built their empire would become evidence that destroyed it. The efficiency that made them rich would make them targets. And the family loyalty that strengthened their operation would become the vulnerability that brought them down. No's story is a heartbreaking lesson about how love for the wrong person can corrupt everything good in someone's life, turning a community asset into a criminal liability and destroying not just her future, but the futures of 3 innocent children. At 37, No was exactly the kind of person communities depend on. She worked at a local nursery in Moss Side, spending her days caring for other people's children with the patience and dedication that makes parents feel confident about leaving their babies with someone else. She was a mother of 3 herself, understanding the trust that childcare requires and the responsibility it entails. But No was also in love with Michael Hassan. Hassan was 28 years old with a criminal record for Class A drug dealing. He was a repeat offender who had already served sentences for drug trafficking. A man whose career choices had repeatedly demonstrated that he valued criminal profit over legitimate responsibility. And somehow, this caring mother and community childcare provider allowed her love for Hassan to transform her into a major drug dealer. The operation they ran together was sophisticated beyond anything most people imagine when they think about neighborhood drug dealing. No's family home became a drug distribution center, with 403 wraps of crack cocaine and 363 wraps of heroin hidden in her wardrobe, stored among her children's clothes, contaminating the family space where her kids did homework and played games. But the most chilling aspect was the systematic nature of their criminal enterprise. No spent £7,000 hiring approximately 10 rental cars to transport drugs from Manchester to Bolton, demonstrating professional logistics planning that legitimate businesses would respect if it wasn't being used to destroy communities. They even planned to open a takeaway called Taste Buds, a money laundering operation disguised as legitimate business, showing how criminal success requires the same entrepreneurial thinking as legal enterprise, just applied to destructive purposes. The daily routine must have been psychologically devastating. Morning, preparing her own children for school, then caring for other people's babies at the nursery, building trust with parents who believed she was protecting their most precious possessions. Afternoon, collecting drug supplies from her wardrobe, coordinating with criminal associates, managing the logistics of drug transportation to Bolton dealers who depended on her reliability. Evening, helping her children with homework while counting drug money, preparing family meals while planning criminal operations, tucking her kids into bed while knowing their home was contaminated with substances that destroy other families. How does someone compartmentalize such extreme moral contradictions? How do you nurture children during the day while poisoning communities at night? How do you build trust with parents while betraying that trust through criminal activity they never suspect? The answer lies in the gradual erosion of moral boundaries that criminal relationships create. Hassan's influence slowly corrupted Umeno's natural instincts toward caring and community service, turning her legitimate skills into criminal assets and her family responsibilities into justifications for criminal behavior. Do you see how love became leverage in criminal recruitment? How someone whose instincts were to protect and nurture children became complicit in supplying the substances that destroy childhood and family stability? Operation Apostle, the police investigation that brought down their criminal enterprise, revealed the full extent of their sophisticated operation. 73,000 pounds in drugs, with a street value exceeding 115,000 pounds. Phone evidence showing coordination between Manchester and Bolton. Rental car records demonstrating professional logistics planning. But perhaps most tragic was the discovery of how their criminal choices had contaminated family life. Children's bedrooms in proximity to Class A substances. Family photos juxtaposed with drug paraphernalia. Homework tables used for counting criminal profits. If the Sully line represented corporate efficiency in drug dealing, and Umeno's operation showed how love could corrupt community service, then Farouk Mir's cocaine canister revealed something even more disturbing. How professional technical skills could be corrupted into criminal innovation that challenged everything law enforcement thought they understood about drug concealment. Farouk Mir was 44 years old with a previous conviction for violent disorder, showing an escalating criminal career that had evolved from violence to sophisticated drug trafficking. But what made Mir different from typical drug dealers was his understanding that modern criminal success required the same kind of professional innovation that legitimate businesses use to stay ahead of competition. His partner in this operation was Safraz Latif, 37, who had previous drug trafficking sentences but brought the transportation expertise that sophisticated criminal operations require. Together, they created what investigators would later describe as one of the most technically sophisticated drug concealment methods they had ever encountered. The gas canister looked completely ordinary, the kind of industrial equipment that thousands of legitimate businesses use every day. But this canister had been professionally modified with engineering precision that would have impressed legitimate manufacturers. When the valve was opened, the canister released real gas, just like any legitimate industrial equipment. Law enforcement officers testing the canister would find exactly what they expected to find: functional gas equipment that appeared to have no criminal purpose whatsoever. But hidden within that ordinary-looking canister were 14 kilograms of high-purity cocaine worth over £1 million on the street.
The engineering required for this concealment was extraordinary. Someone with professional technical knowledge had designed a system that could fool expert inspection while preserving both the cocaine's quality and the canister's legitimate appearance. This wasn't amateur criminal improvisation. This was professional engineering applied to criminal purposes. The operation required sophisticated logistics coordination. Latif transported the canister from London to Bradford, navigating hundreds of miles of British roads while carrying million-pound criminal cargo that could have resulted in decades of imprisonment if discovered. The destination was Cornwall Place in Bradford, where Mir had established a base of operations under the cover of basement renovation work. The legitimate construction activity provided perfect cover for criminal operations, explaining unusual equipment, frequent visitors, and activity at unusual hours. But when police surveillance finally tracked Mir unloading the canister into the house, they discovered that the operation was even more sophisticated than the concealment method suggested. The basement contained industrial-level drug processing equipment, heat sealers for packaging, banknote counter for financial management, angle grinder for operational security. Most disturbing was the discovery of an 8mm pistol, showing how successful drug operations inevitably escalate from avoiding law enforcement to preparing for armed conflict. The weapon represented the violent potential that underlies all sophisticated drug operations, the willingness to use deadly force protecting criminal investments. The raid revealed a criminal enterprise that operated with professional efficiency. This wasn't chaotic street-level drug dealing. This was organized, planned, sophisticated criminal business that required significant investment, technical expertise, and operational security planning. The sophistication of the operation highlighted how modern criminals have adapted to law enforcement techniques. Traditional drug concealment methods, false bottoms, hidden compartments, modified vehicles, had become predictable to experienced officers. So criminals evolved, applying legitimate engineering skills to create concealment methods that challenged law enforcement assumptions about what criminal operations look like. But the same sophistication that made Mir's operation temporarily successful also made it more serious when discovered. Courts recognize that professional criminal planning deserves enhanced punishment compared to opportunistic crime. The engineering knowledge, the million-pound investment, the weapons possession, the interstate transportation, all factors that would influence sentencing when justice finally caught up with their criminal innovation. How do communities protect themselves against criminals whose operations require professional-level technical knowledge to detect? How does law enforcement adapt to criminal innovation that stays ahead of traditional investigative methods? The answer came through the kind of patient, sophisticated surveillance that modern policing requires to counter modern criminal enterprise. But it took months of investigation and international cooperation to unravel what Mir and Latif had created.
When the courtroom doors closed on these sophisticated criminal enterprises, the sentences reflected not just individual punishment, but society's recognition that modern drug dealing had evolved into something far more dangerous than traditional street-level crime. The Sully line leadership faced the full weight of justice for their corporate-style criminal enterprise. Mohammed Ayaz, the director, whose organizational skills had built Bradford's most efficient drug delivery service, received 13 years and 2 months, a sentence that reflected his role in coordinating 229,000 drug transactions over 6 years. His brother, Mohammed Hassan, got 11 years and 4 months, while Tasawir Alam received 10 years, completing the destruction of a leadership triangle that had once felt untouchable. These sentences sent a clear message. Organizing sophisticated criminal enterprises carries proportionate consequences. The street-level sentences revealed the human tragedy of criminal recruitment. Amir Rahman, the storeman whose logistics skills had kept their operation supplied, received 8.5 years. His professional abilities, which could have built legitimate businesses, instead earned him nearly a decade in prison. Shiraz Mahmood, the technology manager who had fled to Islamabad thinking he could escape British justice, discovered that modern criminal law crosses international borders. His 10-year sentence was imposed in absentia, and international cooperation eventually led to his rearrest, proving that sophisticated criminals can't simply disappear across borders. The young casualties tell the most heartbreaking stories. Harim Hussein lost his teenage years to adult criminal recruitment. David Coates saw his military service record corrupted by criminal career choices. But Malachi Hodgson received a suspended sentence that suggested judicial recognition of rehabilitation potential, a glimpse of hope that some young people recruited into criminal enterprises can still reclaim legitimate futures. In Manchester, the courtroom heard testimony about how love and loyalty had destroyed a family. Noor received 4 years and 1 month, a sentence that reflected her first-time offender status, but couldn't account for the devastation her choices had caused to her 3 children, who entered the care system because both parents were imprisoned for drug dealing. Michael Hassan, the repeat offender whose criminal influence had corrupted a caring nursery worker, received 6 years and 8 months. His enhanced sentence reflected his criminal history, but no prison term could undo the damage his influence had caused to someone whose natural instincts were to nurture rather than destroy. The cocaine canister case brought the longest sentences, reflecting the sophistication and potential violence of the operation. Farouk Mehr received 18 years, a sentence that recognized his leadership role, the million-pound scale of the operation, the engineering sophistication of the concealment, and the weapons possession that showed readiness for violent enforcement. Safraz Latif got 11 years for his courier role, demonstrating how even secondary participants in sophisticated criminal operations face substantial consequences. His transportation of the engineered canister from London to Bradford made him complicit in one of the most technically advanced drug concealment methods British law enforcement had encountered. But the legal consequences only tell part of the story. The human wreckage extends far beyond the convicted criminals themselves. The Ayaz and Hassan families watched brothers imprisoned for decades, their family loyalty corrupted into criminal partnership that destroyed multiple family structures. Extended families bore the financial and emotional costs of criminal defense, while communities slowly began recovering from years of drug-related crime that had contaminated residential neighborhoods. Noor's children faced the double trauma of losing both parents to criminal conviction and growing up with the stigma of being drug dealers' children. Their educational and social development was disrupted by adult criminal choices they had no part in making, but would spend years recovering from. Communities affected by these operations began the slow process of healing. Manningham residents worked to reclaim their neighborhood from drug dealing. Moss Side parents found alternative childcare after learning their trusted nursery worker was a major drug dealer. Bradford communities processed the discovery that sophisticated criminal operations had been hiding in residential areas for years. The economic impact was substantial. Millions in drug assets seized and forfeited to the state. Criminal defense costs, destroying families' legitimate financial resources, and the loss of legitimate employment and professional reputations that eliminated future earning potential for the convicted criminals. Do you think these sentences adequately reflected the damage these sophisticated criminals caused to their communities? Whether long prison terms deter other intelligent people from choosing criminal careers? How families and communities can protect themselves against criminal operations that hide behind legitimate facades? The courtrooms delivered justice within the constraints of the legal system, but the broader questions about prevention, community protection, and the social conditions that create sophisticated criminals remained unanswered.
These three cases reveal uncomfortable truths about what drives intelligent, capable people to choose sophisticated criminal enterprises over legitimate alternatives, and why modern drug dealing has evolved into corporate-style criminal business that challenges traditional approaches to law enforcement. The economics tell the fundamental story. Drug prohibition creates artificial scarcity that inflates prices far beyond any rational relationship to production costs. The Sully line's 229,000 calls generated profits that legitimate businesses could never match. No's $115,000 drug stash represented more money than most people earn annually. Mears' $1 million cocaine canister held more value than most houses. These profit margins justify sophisticated criminal investment because the potential rewards vastly exceed the risks, at least in the short-term thinking that drives criminal decision-making. But economics alone don't explain why people like No, with legitimate careers and family responsibilities, choose criminal enterprises. The answer lies in how personal relationships become recruitment mechanisms for criminal organizations. No's love for Hassan transformed her from community asset to criminal liability. The Ayaz brothers' family loyalty strengthened their criminal partnership while making them vulnerable to collective prosecution. Personal relationships that should provide support and positive influence instead become pathways into criminal careers. Technology revolutionized these operations in ways that traditional law enforcement struggled to counter. The Sully line's phone-based efficiency made them more reliable than many legitimate businesses. Mears' engineering expertise created concealment methods that challenged police assumptions about what criminal operations looked like. Modern criminals understand that success requires the same professional skills that legitimate businesses need: logistics, customer service, quality control, operational security, financial management. The difference is that criminal enterprises apply these skills to activities that destroy communities rather than building them. The recruitment pipeline shows how criminal organizations identify and exploit legitimate skills for criminal purposes. Ex-soldiers bring discipline and tactical knowledge. Athletes provide physical capabilities and local connections. Nursery workers offer community trust and legitimate cover. Engineers contribute technical innovation for criminal concealment. Family dynamics play crucial roles in both strengthening and destroying criminal enterprises. Family loyalty provides the trust that criminal operations require, but it also creates vulnerabilities when law enforcement targets entire family networks. The same bonds that make criminal organizations effective ultimately become the mechanisms of their destruction. Community complicity remains a challenging issue. Some neighborhoods develop economic dependence on criminal activity that makes residents reluctant to cooperate with law enforcement. Others suffer from criminal contamination, but lack the resources or social cohesion to resist criminal influence effectively. Law enforcement faces the challenge of adapting to criminal innovation that evolves faster than traditional policing methods. Sophisticated criminals study police techniques and develop countermeasures, creating a technological and tactical arms race between criminal innovation and law enforcement response. The policy questions become unavoidable: whether current approaches address criminal symptoms or criminal causes, how community investment might reduce criminal recruitment, why some areas become centers for sophisticated criminal operations while others remain relatively unaffected. Prevention versus punishment represents the fundamental choice in criminal justice policy. Whether resources are better spent prosecuting criminals after they cause damage, or investing in conditions that reduce criminal recruitment before damage occurs.
The destruction these sophisticated criminal enterprises left behind forces us to confront hard truths about choice, consequence, and the waste of human potential that criminal careers represent. Muhammad Ayaz possessed genuine organizational intelligence that could have built legitimate businesses, created employment for others, contributed to community economic development. Instead, his skills coordinated 229,000 drug transactions that destroyed families and contaminated neighborhoods for years. Umeinu's nurturing instincts and childcare skills made her exactly the kind of person communities depend on for their most precious responsibility, caring for children while parents work. Her corruption into drug dealing didn't just destroy her own family, it betrayed the trust of every parent who had relied on her professional dedication. Farouk Mir's engineering abilities could have contributed to legitimate innovation, construction projects, technological advancement that benefits society. Instead, he applied professional technical knowledge to create concealment methods that made million-pound drug operations temporarily invisible to law enforcement. The ripple effects extend far beyond the convicted criminals themselves. 3 children entered the care system because their nursery worker mother chose criminal loyalty over family responsibility. Countless families suffered from addiction supplied by these sophisticated operations. Entire neighborhoods required years to recover from criminal contamination that made normal community life impossible. But these stories also reveal reasons for hope and pathways toward prevention that don't require simply punishing people after damage is done. Communities that invest in legitimate economic opportunity reduce the attractions of criminal enterprise. Young people with educational and career options are less likely to accept criminal recruitment. Families with strong social support systems resist criminal influence more effectively. Early intervention programs can identify people at risk of criminal recruitment and provide alternatives before criminal careers begin. Community-based solutions that address root causes often work better than purely punitive approaches that only respond after crimes occur. Some former criminals have successfully applied their organizational and technical skills to legitimate enterprises, demonstrating that human potential isn't permanently corrupted by criminal choices. Rehabilitation programs that respect intelligence while redirecting it toward constructive purposes can transform criminal assets into community resources. The personal responsibility remains crucial. Individual choices about relationships, loyalty, and ethics shape life trajectories in ways that no social program can override. But those individual choices occur within community and economic contexts that make some options more attractive than others. If this exploration of sophisticated criminal enterprises has shown you how intelligent people can make catastrophically stupid choices, how love and loyalty can become weapons of destruction, and how communities can work to prevent criminal recruitment while ensuring accountability for criminal behavior, subscribe to Dark Truth Files for more stories that reveal the complex truths behind crime and punishment. Comment below about crime prevention, community investment, and the balance between individual responsibility and social support. Share this video if you believe others need to understand how sophisticated criminal operations developed and how they can be prevented. The Sully line, Umeinu's double life, and Nir's engineered canister all started with individuals who believed they were too smart to get caught, too sophisticated to face consequences, too untouchable to fall. They were wrong, and their stories prove that no criminal enterprise, regardless of its sophistication, can indefinitely avoid the fundamental truth that criminal success is always temporary while criminal consequences are permanent. The choice between building communities and destroying them remains available to everyone. The question is whether we have the wisdom to choose construction over corruption, legitimate challenge over criminal shortcut, and long-term community benefit over short-term criminal profits.